I'm Lester E. Johnson. I enlisted in the service on October 15, 1942. Initially, I went into the Air Force. They called it Aircorps at the time. And I was stationed at Midland Field, Texas, which was a bombardier training school. I worked on the flight lines, keeping the bombers flying over their target range. I worked there for about 8 months, and then I took a very comprehensive test, and out of the 200 on the field that took this test, there were 29 of us that went on to college. I was at Vanderbilt University under what they call the Army Specialized Training Program, which was an engineering program. At the end of about 10 months, the government closed the program down. So I ended up first going to the 106th Infantry Division at Camp Atterbury, Indiana. I was there for about 3 weeks, and from there to Camp Crowder, Missouri, which was part of the time that was a training field for the Signal Corps. But I was there in the Combat Engineer Company, Company A of the 285th Combat Engineers. We trained there. From there, we went to Camp Atterbury, Indiana for a short period of time. From there to Camp Shelby, Mississippi for more advanced training. From there we went overseas. During my time in the Combat Engineers, my specialty was mines, booby traps, and explosives. And I trained extensively in the stateside, in England, and then shortly before the Battle of the Bulge in France at Epernay, learning the latest techniques that the Germans had for their mines. I knew every mine that they had in their arsenal, and I was sent on ahead. There were 9 of us that were 9 sergeants that were sent to mine school, both in England and in France. And we were sent on ahead of our battalion. And then when our battalion arrived, which was in the first part of January, and the Bulge, of course, was in full swing at the time, and we were stationed along a line all the way from Belgium down to the southern part of Luxembourg. That line was very fragile, very thin. And the object was to keep German infiltrators behind our lines. During that time, of course, the weather was just terrible. There's snow and cold and wet, and we didn't have the proper gear. I had trench foot, and but we had to suffer through it. I did spend a considerable time on that front there, and I don't know how I can explain it, but it was just miserable time. I was a squad sergeant, and I was in charge of probably about 15, 16 men. During that time, I took out mines on the enemy side of the river, spent 3 nights across there, and I took out, I believe, some over 20 mines during those 3 nights. And that was in advance of the assault across that river.
What was the river?
Sour.
Okay.
And the Sour River. part of our outfit was stationed along the Moselle River. And that, I was in the Patton's Third Army. Most of the time we were attached to either one or the other of the armored outfits. We were spent quite a bit of time with the 4th Armored Division, with 11th Armored Division. After the time on the Bulge, then of course it was a mad rush to get across the Rhine River. And as you know, the combat engineers most of the time, or a lot of the time, are out forward of the armored units, because we had to take roadblocks out of their way. We had to take mines out of the roads. The Germans used explosives to blow what we call abattis. It's all these trees. They would follow them across the road, and we'd be up in there with these big chainsaws cutting them, and at the same time we had our people out front keep the snipers in check. And some of those abattis were probably 8 feet high, so there was no tanks or tank destroyer or tank dozers that could push their way through until we got them cut through.
Wow.
Then when we got to the Rhine, we participated in the building of the pontoon bridge to get armored and get everybody across the river. There were several different companies or battalions of combat engineers that were assembling pontoon bridge, we call them treadway bridge sections upstream, and then they would float them down, and then they would catch them and then assemble them or connect them to the main bridge. I crossed that Rhine River within a very short period of time after the first tanks were across it. That the Germans, of course, were shelling constantly to keep us from doing our job.
Well, it didn't work, did it? It didn't work.
It didn't.
The shelling didn't stop you.
No, it didn't stop us. No.
Okay, what happened next?
Well, then of course it was a race across Germany, and periodically we were, you know, the Germans put up some pretty fierce fighting at various periods of time. There were, I remember one time our armored outfits ran into an area where there must have been about 15 of our tanks all burning at one time. And but as we went through Germany, we were responsible for keeping the roads open through these towns that had been heavily bombed. The streets, of course, were impassable, and we had our bulldozers, and that had to open it up so the tanks could get through.
How much time did you spend in Germany then? In Germany? How much?
In Germany?
Yeah.
Well, I was on the spearhead all the way through Germany into Czechoslovakia, where we met the Russians. So
that must have been interesting. What was that like?
Well, the Russian army was kind of a ragtag, kind of put together of all kinds of machinery and equipment and horse-drawn and that. The Russian soldiers, of course, seemed happy that this was over with. The German people or the German soldiers, they were happy that it was over with. It might seem that they would be the other, but no, they were glad that the war was over.
So when you got to Czechoslovakia, the war had come to an end?
Yeah, we were inside maybe 20 miles or a little bit more into Czechoslovakia, and that's when the war ended.
How did you know it had come to an end when you were there? How did you
Well,
find
that
out?
came down through channels. I don't know how.
And do you remember how it was told to you?
No, I can't remember.
I wonder how the Russians knew. Was there any kind of parties going on because of that?
Well, I don't know. They they found out some way because they seemed to be happy.
Now, the German soldiers you encountered when the war was over, were there very many you had to encounter, and what happened to them? Or
there were thousands and thousands of German prisoners, of course.
yeah,
And after the war was over, we built a supposed to be a prisoner of war camp at Plattling, Germany, to hold 20,000 POWs. And we had 6 weeks to build that camp.
oh,
We had 1,000 POWs, German prisoners, working there. We never had to worry about them leaving because they got, first place, they got 3 square meals a day,
yeah.
you know, and they were treated very fairly. And I don't know where they kept them, but they would bring them in there by their truckloads, you know. In fact, I checked out 1,000 of them at one point in time to work there. My job during that time was to manage about 11 sawmills to saw the lumber for these buildings.
Where did the wood come from? Just the local forest?
Like lumber yards and that.
Okay.
They had stockpiles of logs, of course, and I don't know how those sawmills got paid. I'm sure they got paid after the war was over by the German government.
Now, when you left there, where did you go? Did you stay there for a while? Or
Well, I have to back up a little bit.
okay.
While we were building that camp and I was out supervising these sawmills, I developed a terrible sore throat, and I ran a high fever. I went to the medics. He looked at my throat and he says, "Oh, you got diphtheria." So I spent the next 6 weeks in a hospital at Passau, Germany. It was the 110th evac hospital, run by the, it was a German hospital, but it was run by the U.S. Army. And so I was one very sick boy. I lost 20-some pounds, and I'm not very big in the first place. But I survived it.
Well, what happened after you left the hospital? Where'd you go?
I went back. My unit had moved on towards home. I got assigned to another combat engineer battalion at 243rd. And all it was kind of a place to recuperate. And I did have no duties. I hunted deer.
Huh.
We shot deer, and we brought them back to the mess hall, and we had deer in all kinds of forms.
Now, this was where in Germany then?
That was near Deggendorf, is the
Okay.
name of it, and that was a town that was near the Danube River.
Wow. Now, did you stay as a part of the occupation force, or did you come home?
No, I came home and was discharged January 16th of 1946.
How'd you get back? By ship or plane?
Ship. A ship that didn't run very well. I was on a Liberty ship, and
yes.
we had a lot of mechanical problems, and it took us 22 days to get back from Marseille, France.
When you left the States to go to France, were you concerned about having the boat torpedoed?
Well, that concern, that was a concern, especially as you got towards England. When you got within reach of where the submarines were operating. At one time, we were, the convoy was attacked by a submarine, but our tank destroyers, I think, were able to take care of it. Our convoy, we were told, was the largest convoy that had ever crossed the Atlantic. You could never see the ends, both ends of it. We were perhaps about the 4th or 5th ship in the line, but you couldn't see the last one.
Wow. Any other unusual experiences that you came across while you were going through Europe?
Well, I'll tell you an interesting one. As we were in Germany on the way through, there was a building, and it was a house, a fairly large house, constructed of like a cinder block construction, so it was not an old house. And in that house there was a huge safe. They had apparently had been some headquarters for some military operation. So I was told to see if I could open that safe, being an explosives person. So first I put on about, I think, three blocks of TNT, which is 1.5 pounds, and ran outside, and boom, part of the walls would come out. One of my fellows that was with me, he was standing under the eaves, and they had clay tile roof, and I can still see that clay tile bouncing off his helmet. I got the safe open on the 3rd try, but there was only 2 walls left on that building. Inside there were all kinds of records, and there was a lot of money, folding paper money.
German money.
German money. I turned that over to our company commander, and later on they ended up buying beer and that with it. So that was kind of
a plus. A plus for you.
Just one of those kind of things that happens that's a little bit of fun to it.
Did you ever find out what the papers were for?
No, it was turned over to G2, and so I have no idea.
Well, I guess you were lucky to get through that whole mess. And
I was lucky. 2 times I was really lucky. That one of them was as I was approaching one of my positions, and this is at night. And then, unfortunately, that happened before a shell explosion that did some damage to my ears. But I heard this click, and I wasn't with 15, 20 feet from that position. And as I looked down, there was a little glint of something, and enough light that I was looking down a gun barrel. And I hollered right away. I said, "Hi, Robbie," because I knew that this fellow was in that position. And he crawled out of that foxhole and came up and gave me a big bear hug, and he cried like a baby because he said, "One more second," he said, "I probably would have blown you away." And he was a fellow that I had helped along during the time in training, and that if he got into trouble, I was there to help him. And one time, that same individual was, we were at, I can't remember the name of the town. But anyway, we were being shelled and we were going to have to get out of town. And so I said to everybody, we're going to load up and get out of here. And this individual said, he said, there might not be any wine where we're going. He said, can I go down and get some wine? I said, no. He went anyway. Well, they shot at him when he was on his way down. When he came back, he had a big bag like a dog food bag, and he was walking in the snow there, and all of a sudden there was air burst and all kinds of shrapnel chewing up the snow, and down he went. So I started down there, which wasn't healthy. Well, pretty soon he takes that bag and he gets up and on his knees and he dumped the broken bottles out of there. Everything was red there. I didn't know if it was blood or red wine. He put a few bottles back in that. I turned around and I walked the other way.
Did he make it back then?
He made it.
How many bottles of wine did he bring?
Oh, I can't remember. He had a few.
Yeah.
But he had too many in the first place.
Too much weight. He couldn't run. God.
You know, and it wasn't healthy to go into those wine cellars and places because the first place the Germans would booby trapped, you know, a lot of those areas. I guess I can say that there were a lot of guys that had it a lot worse than I did, but I had it bad enough, and I seemed like I was lucky wherever I turned. It was the right turn. When I left the Air Force, but the rest of the fellows took gunnery training, were sent overseas, were shot down over Romania. When I was at the 106th Infantry Division, I was sent then to the 285th Combat Engineers. The battalion that I was in 106th Infantry Division was the 424th, and then an H Company, which was the heavy machine guns and that. That outfit was hit head-on in the Bulge, and they lost most of the men. So I was dodged the bullet there. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Well, now when you came back by boat, where did the boat land at? New York?
Yeah, right.
Now when you left for France, did you leave New York?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a chance to stay in New York for a while and see it?
No. We weren't there. We were only there a day or so, just, I guess.
And they put you on a train?
We went there by train from Camp Shelby, Mississippi.
Let me back up. Where's your hometown? Where'd you live when you were drafted?
Tamarack, Minnesota, which is about 50 miles west of Duluth.
Okay.
In Aiken County.
And you got back from New York to your hometown by train?
Right, yeah. Through Camp Crowder, Missouri.
Okay, you had to go that route, then that...
No, Camp Crowder, not Camp Crowder, Camp Crowder, no. Wisconsin.
Well, camp in Wisconsin. So you went from
Yep.
New York to Wisconsin. Now, did you go by train from there back to your hometown?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Wow. Thank you for sharing that with everybody.
Well, that's...
It's important.
I ended up with one souvenir anyway. I took off a German prisoner.
Yeah, okay.
Walther's P38.
Yep.
I don't know if you care to see it or not. I got this off a German SS, a stormtrooper officer, shortly after the Bulge. And that was before or while we were on the way to the Rhine, because we had taken quite a number of prisoners then. It's a Walther's P38, shoots a 9mm Luger ammunition. That Walther's P38 replaced the Luger because the Luger was a finely tuned handgun that could not stand much
Dirt.
That bridge, we started that bridge in the middle of the afternoon. I was responsible for building the bents out in the center. That was my responsibility. And as we were, well, first I had to put on about 120 pounds of TNT on some steel that was in the way. And so I detonated that and got it cleared off, and I was working out there. No, I hadn't detonated it yet. And I heard a horse coming on the cobblestone streets across the river. The street paralleled the river. And I looked up. That horse thought the bridge was still there. And I can still see it to this day. That horse out in midair with his eyes wide open and his mouth open, and he hit that bridge where it's laying on down into the water, and he's down in there with that broken up steel and that. And then shortly behind, see, now we're overrunning the civilians. Shortly behind him was the owner, and he looked down. He says, "Oh, nein, mein Pferd." Pferd is horse in German. And I told him he had 5 minutes to get that horse out, or I had an interpreter tell him that he had 5 minutes to get that horse out of there. Well, then I thought better, and I had a soft spot. So we got over there, and we managed to get that horse up on his feet on something.
He survived.
And he didn't have any broken legs. And we pushed him off into that, and you can see that strong current there. That horse swam against that current across the river and up a ramp.
And what happened to the owner?
Well, the owner is in on one side of that bridge and the horse is on the other. So I don't know what happened. While we were building that bridge, we were shelled 3 different times. Fortunately, none of it hit us or the bridge. One shell hit behind that house that's up there. One down in the water, just about where that horse went into the water, and one maybe 100 yards beyond. We finished that bridge before morning, and they were putting tanks across it.
Did you ever go into any German POW camps?
Yes, we went to, I don't remember how many of these concentration camps it must have been 3 or 4 of those camps that we were there just about the earliest possible, and there were still the prisoners there. These prisoners had been used by the Germans to, well, one of the things that they did was they made cobblestones for the highways, and they had set up these places where they made those cobblestones. The building must have been 300 feet long and maybe only 20 feet wide or something. It was just stalls like you would put pigs or calves or whatever in. Each one of these little stalls is where these prisoners would work. making those cobblestones. That's just one of the things. Near these concentration camps, they were, and the visibility of it is in my mind, just like that happened. I can still see those prisoners that they had died. They'd worked them to death, and then they would just bring them up out into the woods, and they were laying there in rows and piles in their striped clothes. And they were probably not only Jews, but Poles and whoever else. And they would work them until there's nothing left of them, you know, they were just skin and bones. And it was really disheartening to see that somebody could treat a human race like they did. We also were almost at the same time as as we were going on through, liberated camps that had American prisoners in them. And in one camp, they were British that had been there since Dunkirk, which I don't remember how many years that was. But they would say, "Oh, old chap, I'm sure glad that you came by." Well, they were so happy, and they were so thin and emaciated too, that and I'm sure that a lot of their buddies died there in that camp too. But
do you happen to remember the name of the camp?
No, I can't remember the name of the camps and that, because you're coming and going so fast through there, and that it's. I don't know what else to say. It's we did not get into the Dachau kind of camp.
Well, now the camps that you were in, there were American soldiers there.
There were American soldiers in some of them, and there were English soldiers in others. And that. So
they were trying to recover as many people as possible.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be concerned if we have a lot of bodies piled up. Wouldn't that be disease? I mean, wouldn't that offer a problem for disease in the camps?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I'm surprised they did that.
There was one, he had been a prisoner, and he had been beat so bad, I guess, by a rifle butt, and his head was swelled up and I sent him back and hoped that our medics could give him some relief, but it was so pathetic.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what was your purpose of being there? To construct something at the prison camps, or are you just going through?
No, this was on the spearhead going through.
Oh, you were just going through. Okay.
Yeah.
You didn't go to the camps for a specific reason.
No.
Just going by.
No.
It. Okay.
No.
Wow.
They were.
Yeah, sure.
Pretty tough.